No one wanted the massive dog. Shackled in heavy chains, lips curled back in a snarl, his very presence sent shivers through the crowd. Whispers hissed through the air, worthless, dangerous, uncontrollable, beyond saving. One by one, every offer was rejected. Fear had condemned him long before the auctioneer's gavel could fall. No one dared to step forward. No one until a broken war veteran slowly rose from the back of the crowd. His frame was weary, his face etched with scars both seen and unseen. And yet his eyes didn't hold fear. They held recognition. He walked straight toward the beast, the murmurs swelling into gasps of disbelief. The dog lunged, chains rattling like thunder. But instead of recoiling, the veteran leaned closer and whispered a single word, a name. In that chilling instant, something impossible happened. The beast froze. The yard, once filled with fear, fell silent. Every eye locked on the scene unfolding before them. And in that silence, the savage monster everyone had written off began to change. The sun blazed mercilessly over the dusty auction yard, heat shimmering off the steel cages lined in rows. Farmers and traders crowded shoulder to shoulder, their chatter fading into uneasy silence as the rattling of chains announced the arrival of the next lot. From the shadows, he appeared, a massive German shepherd, his fur ragged, his eyes blazing like embers. The dog lunged forward with such force the cage rattled violently, metal screeching as though it might tear apart. Mothers yanked their children closer, men muttered under their breath, and the auctioneer's forced grin barely masked his trembling voice. Strong animal, perfect for guarding, he declared, banging his gavel. But no one stepped forward. Not a single hand lifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. Savage. Worthless. Put him down. The dog's growl deepened, echoing like thunder, each snarl a mixture of rage and despair. He wasn't just chained, he was condemned. And then through the wall of fear, one man moved. David Miller, a war veteran scarred by battles no one else could see, stood tall, his gaze locked on the beast. Where others saw a monster, he saw something painfully familiar: brokenness. When he whispered a single name, Thor, the impossible happened. The dog froze. The chain was shoved into David's hands, the weight of it nearly yanking him forward as Thor lunged with a furious snarl. Gasps rippled through the crowd, some expecting blood to spill at any second. But David didn't flinch. His grip stayed firm, his eyes steady on the raging beast. "Easy, Thor," he murmured, a voice calm but resolute. The name hung in the air like an anchor. For a brief moment, Thor's wild eyes flickered, not with submission, but with hesitation. It was enough. David took a slow step forward, pulling gently on the chain. The dog resisted, muscles coiled, growls vibrating deep in his chest. Every step was a battle, each inch hard-won against fear and fury. The auction yard fell silent, whispers chasing after him. "He'll never control that monster. That man's a fool." But David ignored them. He knew what it was like to be chained by scars no one else could see. By the time they reached the edge of the lot, Thor's snarls had dulled into low rumbles. His ears twitched at David's voice, uncertain but listening. For the first time, the veteran felt the faintest spark of possibility. Not trust, not yet, but hope. David's small home felt worlds away from the dusty auction yard, but Thor's fury hadn't dimmed. The moment the chain was clipped to a post in the corner, the massive dog thrashed teeth, snapping claws, scraping the wooden floor. Neighbors peeked through their curtains at the sound, whispering that the veteran had brought danger into their street. David sat a few feet away, calm but unyielding. He didn't shout. He didn't strike. He simply sat with his back against the wall, his weathered hands resting on his knees. The hours dragged on, filled with guttural growls and rattling chains. Yet David stayed, murmuring softly, "Easy, Thor. You're safe now." By midnight, the storm inside the dog began to falter. The snarls faded into heavy breathing, the wild thrashing into restless pacing. Thor's amber eyes never left David, uncertain, suspicious, but watching. For the first time, there was no lunging, no snapping, only silence. David leaned forward slowly, setting down a bowl of water and a small piece of bread. Thor's ears twitched, his body trembling with indecision. Finally, he edged forward, snatching the bread with a quick snap before retreating to the corner. David smiled faintly. It wasn't victory, it was survival. And in that tiny exchange, a door had opened. That night, as the veteran drifted into uneasy sleep on the floor, Thor's growls softened into low whimpers. Not of rage, but of memory. For both man and beast, the long road to healing had just begun. The first days with Thor were nothing short of a battlefield. Every time David approached, the giant German shepherd's lips curled back, his body trembling with fury. Food bowls were only accepted when slid from a safe distance. Nights were the worst. Thor's howls rattled the walls, long aching cries that sounded less like anger and more like a soul remembering every chain, every scar, every betrayal. Neighbors shook their heads. "That dog will never change," one muttered. Others crossed the street, refusing to walk near David's home. But the veteran remained unfazed. Each morning he sat on the floor beside Thor's cage, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand, a bowl of food in the other. He didn't force, didn't shout, didn't beg. He simply stayed. "Easy, Thor," he whispered daily, his voice low and steady. Hours passed in silence, man and beast locked in a quiet standoff. And slowly, something began to shift. On the fourth day, Thor's growl didn't come when David entered. Instead, the dog's amber eyes tracked him cautiously, ears flicking with curiosity. By the end of the week, Thor accepted food from David's hand for the first time. His jaws trembled, snapping the kibble quickly, but his teeth never touched flesh. David's heart swelled. "That's enough for today," he murmured, resisting the urge to push further. Trust he knew could not be rushed. Then one evening, the breakthrough came. David stirred awake from a nightmare sweat dampening his brow. Before he could steady his breath, a weight pressed gently against his leg. Thor was there, lying close, his eyes soft in the moonlight. Not snarling, not raging, just present. David's hand hovered uncertainly before resting on the scarred fur. Thor flinched, then stilled. In that fragile silence, a bond was born, two broken souls beginning to heal together. It was a cold evening when the sound of breaking glass jolted David from sleep. His heart raced as shards clattered across the floor of his small home. For a split second, his soldier's instincts screamed danger. Before he could rise from bed, a deep growl rolled through the room like thunder. Thor was already awake. The massive German shepherd stood rigid, his body a wall between David and the darkened hallway. His hackles rose, ears pinned forward, and his amber eyes blazed as they locked onto the shadow moving inside. The intruder had chosen the wrong house. Thor David whispered, his voice low but steady. It was not a command, it was trust. The dog surged forward with terrifying speed, his roar filling every corner of the house. The masked figure stumbled back, crashing into a chair as Thor lunged, his teeth snapping inches from the man's arm. The intruder's bravado crumbled into panic. He swung wildly, grabbing at a lamp, but Thor dodged with predator's precision, his growls vibrating the walls. David moved quickly, his training kicking in. "Stay," he barked, and to his astonishment, Thor obeyed, holding the intruder pinned with nothing more than presence and fury. Moments later, the wail of sirens filled the night. The would-be thief bolted through the shattered door, disappearing into the darkness. Thor didn't chase. He returned to David's side, his chest heaving, eyes still fierce, yet steady. For the first time, David realized Thor wasn't just learning to trust. He had chosen his purpose: protector, guardian, friend. News of the attempted break-in spread quickly through the town. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid Thor now spoke in hushed voices of the night. He stood guard over his master. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others admitted with awe the savage giant was no monster, he was a protector. Days later, David and Thor walked through the town square. For the first time, no one jeered or whispered. Children pointed with wide eyes, tugging at their parents' sleeves, while adults nodded respectfully. The dog, once feared as uncontrollable, now walked calmly at David's side, his powerful frame steady, his eyes soft but alert. The local paper ran the headline, "From Savage to Savior, the dog who protected his master." Reporters wanted interviews, but David said little. He only placed his hand on Thor's head and replied, "He saved me. That's all that matters." In the weeks that followed, Thor's presence became a symbol of resilience. People who had once doubted now saw hope in his transformation. For David, the bond was unshakable. They were two broken souls who had found strength in each other's scars. And as Thor lay at David's feet each night, calm at last, the world knew true loyalty can turn even the fiercest storm into peace. Thor's journey reminds us of something profound: no soul is ever truly beyond saving. What the world once labeled as savage and uncontrollable was in truth a creature scarred by pain, fear, and betrayal. All it took was one man, David, choosing to see beyond the growls and the chains, to believe there was still hope where everyone else had given up. In life, people often carry their wounds the same way Thor carried his rage, hidden beneath anger, silence, or mistrust. It is easy to judge, to turn away, or to dismiss them as too broken. But compassion has the power to break walls where force never will. Just as Thor transformed from feared beast to loyal protector, people too can rediscover trust, love, and purpose when given patience and understanding. This story isn't only about a dog and a veteran, it's about second chances for both of them and for all of us. Sometimes healing begins the moment someone looks at us, not for what we've become, but for who we could still be. And that kind of faith can turn even the fiercest storm into peace.